I think culture is often we talk about it. I think at some level we understand that that plays a role, but we always think it comes down to money. And look, money is important, but there is so much evidence. We've all seen it as managers through the years when, the number one thing of why people leave, they may say it's money, but when you actually have that exit interview and you talk to them, it's not.
So yeah, I'd love to jump in on the topic that Christine wanted to use, which was a sort of a common theme that touched on all of our EMA podcasts, which is, obviously businesses run on people, and the people need to know, what the North Star is and be aligned in KPIs. And sometimes different groups within a company end up with different KPIs that don't align with each other, right? And it manifests itself very differently in B2B companies than it does in B2C companies. I mean, B2B companies, we often see this disconnect between sales and marketing, and then this sort of potential tension between CMOs and CROs. And then in the consumer space, there isn't sort of typically the CRO role, but at the same time, you don't necessarily always have alignment either within marketing. The typical things I remember back in the days when I was at J. Walter Thompson and McCann Erickson is I could not understand that the direct response team and the branding team never spoke to each other, right? So there's all these areas where KPI misalignment and objective misalignment and goal misalignment can bubble up into the organization. So how do you fix that, right? If you're in a C-suite role and you have the opportunity to sort of get everybody pointed in the right direction, where do you start?
I think one of the major things that happens is kind of communication gaps. And, I'll recall when I was at USAA, we brought on a new CMS, and, that's a project that involves heavy IT, marketing. There was a lot of discussion a couple of years back that the CMO had as much IT budget as the CIO in some respects. And so we were implementing a new CMS, and, it was a 3-year project from start to finish because it had a lot of connections into the business. And, the IT department and the marketing team have to work in close proximity. So we actually went far and above. We ended up actually hiring IBM to help us program manage, but particularly the communication of it, the constant communication, because that old thing, nobody hears anything until you say it 3 or 4 times. So, and that program communication was a consistent drumbeat of what we're trying to achieve, where are we in the process, where are we lagging behind, how we can bring it all together. So I just would urge people not to underestimate the importance of communication and making that constant and not having that be haphazard and let individual managers do it at their discretion, but to really have a cadence and have it be structured with either folks from your internal comms team, or you hire someone just who's keeping that, especially on a large project that goes over years and involves, maybe hundreds of people. You can't underestimate the importance of communications.
I was just going to take a slightly different bent in the sense that, most of the companies I'm working with are not as large and sophisticated as many of the companies that you guys had been at, as leaders. And you would think it would be easier in smaller organizations. I think it's harder because they literally have no mechanisms for communication, to Tony's really good point. And so they're sort of creating all this on the fly and trying to create that. And I want to also call out, absolutely agree with you, Kevin, the marketing sales thing, like it's as classic goes. But I want to talk about like product marketing and product management. And, there's this existential discussion about, should product marketing be in marketing? Should it be in product? Where does product marketing end? Where does product management? And so I think part of, there are 2 pieces there that I think help in like dealing with that sort of issue, which is one, how well we define the swim lanes. So that's very clear who owns what portion. And then the second piece of it, I think as well, is about skills. Sometimes, and I'll flip now over to a completely different example between marketing and sales, like where does an inside selling team reside? Should it reside in marketing or sales? I'll tell you, I don't care. I do care who is the person who has the best skill at managing an SDR team. That's where it resides. And so I think there are no rules here as much as a decision about how we're going to organize ourselves, how we're going to structure communication, and where we're going to set the boundaries.
Mhm. So there's so many interesting things in what you both have said. And Gary, the company I'm at now, we're a $3 billion company, so global. So it is big. I mean, it's not as big as some of the others I've worked at, but it's big. But what's interesting is that what you're saying resonates because Convergent started 2001, 23 years ago in the basement. These two guys left Siemens. They were like, they wanted to start the anti-company. It was really all about corporate culture. That was their bent. And they were in like the fire and alarm security systems space. And so that's kind of how it started. And then of course they started in early '01 and then 9/11 happened. And so then it burgeoned into other security, obviously, because of the great demand and need and attention. But the cultural piece plays, I think, I'm with you on communications. Tony, the inside sales happens to live with me now. Like, so the sales and marketing, like all those pieces, what I'm kind of the overlay, I guess, my third contribution to this component of the conversation is culture. So I have been at a lot of companies, as you heard, and I've consulted for more. But I've never been in a company where the culture was so large. That's not true. Walmart had a large culture, but this culture is large in a really positive way. I mean, it was set up because they didn't want people, they didn't want hierarchy. They went so far as they didn't want titles. Now we have titles, of course, when you're 11,000 people, that helps a little. They didn't want internal, they wouldn't, no centralized processes because they wanted every person who was in whatever market to just set up and own their own thing and just run it, and so there was they don't call it, we're colleagues. There's no employee, you know what I mean? So that cultural piece, and they built a company in these 10 values and beliefs, 5 values, 5 beliefs. We all have these the cards that we carry. I could throw it out of my wallet here for you, but we carry these cards. They're in languages. I've traveled the world this is the piece, I think, that ties together, Tony, what you were talking about, the value of communication. I think, Gary, what you were talking about the alignment of roles and responsibilities and who does it and doesn't. The cultural piece, I think, sets the tone for how successful you're going to be in any of that. And one of the benefits of wisdom is, and the amount of years that we've spent around, is I think taking that understanding of culture sort of trumping all of this. That, at least for me, that is my life's takeaway that I talk about. Is I choose companies first and foremost on the culture of the company, followed closely by the opportunity, right? What are the financials? What is using all the business acumen that we have. But if the culture isn't one that is compatible with how you are as a person, how you show up and want to show up, in your best self, then it doesn't matter how astute you are, how much experience and wisdom you have, the ability to communicate well and to connect, to, negotiate and find what's best for the company in terms of where should inside sales sit? Well, how should we measure it? How do we those things become exponentially harder to be successful at without that overlay. And so, for me, I'm extraordinarily excited and proud of this company because of the cultural piece, but I will tell you, it has made every day better because I feel that cultural support every day. So that's my contribution to the kind of the three-prong components, Kevin, of your question, maybe.
Yeah, thanks so much. That leads really well to sort of a follow-up question, which is, corporate culture or company culture for gigantic companies like Walmart. People scratch their heads and say, well, these people are so dispersed, right? And have been for generations in the case of Walmart, right? So somehow they've managed to keep a corporate culture, like top down or however it gets distributed and continues to exist. And a lot of companies post pandemic that had a corporate culture which was very place-based, right, are now struggling with how do you continue to have that alignment of corporate culture and sort of understanding the vision and the North Star and the mission, right? How do they do it when you don't have the opportunity for sort of the water cooler element of culture and of alignment, right? Do you just throw technology at it and say, oh, well, we're going to use Slack to keep everybody corporately aligned or culturally aligned? How do you do it? Because culture is an emotional thing. It's not an intellectual thing.
Can I lead off on this one since
Sure, absolutely.
I feel so passionate about it. So I told you I had them, right? Here's the conversion. We call them the V's and the B's. 5 of them are we's, and then 5 of them are I's. Okay. But we're 11,000 colleagues. We're decentralized. Yes, we have a headquarters. We don't call it headquarters because that would have been antithetical, right? So it's the Convergent Development Center because the job of centralized functions was to help to develop colleagues. And then our offices around the world aren't regional offices. They're CTCs, they're Convergent Technical Centers, right? So it's all very purposeful. And so there's 2 things I would say about how do you make this work in a non-place-based, operating mechanism. And so one is that you've got to have that common language that your leaders, regardless of where they reside and whether they have offices or whether they're managing virtually, live by and reinforce all the time. And so like that, those V's and B's, those, it's not just a thing we have, but we infuse, like we just had this big leaders meeting with our 150 leaders. Our CFO and our president of North America, who it's like 75 or 80% of our colleagues, because that's how we started in Chicago. But they got up on stage and they had these slides that were really about the financial strategy. And so you'd say, okay, the financial strategy, growth or M&A, managing slip, like all those things that are very, business fiscally. Well, on each page, on the top of each page, they had listed a V or B, a value or belief, right? I am convergent. I own my place on the team. I get results. Those are all some of the V's and B's. And it's not just about lip service. It's not just about having this thing and then doing like we believe in fun and laughter every day, and it's like not just once a week, every day. So there's these things that it's really beholden on the leadership around the world. And it's not just the executive leadership. Certainly we have to walk the talk, but it's also just the leadership, the general managers of those local offices, whether or not people are in or out, that it is infused in the language and it's infused in everything that they do every day. And if that isn't there, if that belief of that culture in terms of why you come to work every day isn't there, it does fall apart. So it's hard work, and it's not something that can be top down. I mean, it has to happen top down, but it really has to be in a belief that bottom up. And I tell you, they like I'm new, and so relatively new, and they hold us accountable. Like we do a town hall, we'll get feedback. I didn't hear a lot about culture today. Like, you know what I mean? And so you got to find the balance, but they hold you accountable to it. And so it keeps us on our toes. But I would say that those pieces it's got to be infused even in the things it doesn't seem natural necessarily, like a financial conversation. And it's really a bottoms up. It's a leadership at every level.
Yeah, great insight. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
No, look, I'll probably take a step back a little bit. I'm a big believer that the time together, especially in the marketing function, is so unique to our function. And the idea of a whiteboard and a couple hours of riffing with folks just leads to better ideas. I think things, especially like creative, are very hard to be done remote. And maybe I'm showing my age here at being 60 and ready to walk off the field. But I'm really worried about this next young generation of marketers, because I think between being impacted by COVID and this dispersed workforce now, the idea of apprenticeship and mentorship and sponsorship, things that happen, I think, often face to face, where you get to really know someone and see how they think. I think me is a little stunted by this idea of being, fully remote. And I'm not saying you need to come in every day, but I worry about how it's going to impact promotions, how folks are going to learn some of the unique natures and crafts of our industry. And so I'm a big believer that sometime in the office, spending together, shared values, breaking bread together, laughs, like you can't replicate that stuff digitally. It just is impossible. And I think it's a big part of building kind of a world-class team is spending time together. So like I said, maybe it's my time in the Marine Corps that like you lead from the front, and when things are really, really rough, you see the character of someone and what's going on, and you need some of that togetherness. So anyway,
I want to plus
one
Tony.
man's opinion, one old man's opinion.
No. I want to plus one on that because I think, first of all, I'm seeing there's definitely a tale of two cities among our portfolio. There are founders which are saying, we must be together. We lost something. They see it. And not just in marketing, certainly in any creative, engineers are having a hard time not being together in a room, and what they're missing from that. And I too, Tony, am super focused on this new generation. I like to say, I'm not on the back nine, I'm like on 17. Like it's fine, I'm going to be fine. But in this AI powered world, the apprenticeship model across industries is going to be challenged. I'm going to use something that has nothing to do with any of our businesses. I'll use the law profession. Totally a apprentice model. And what they did was they gave the junior associates the capacity to do the easy work, the not complex drafting. And they learned from that. And then as they got more skills, their responsibilities grew. Well, imagine a world where, AI is taking care of all the easy stuff. There's actually no reason for them to do that easy rote thing. But there is a reason. And I was talking to someone about this. I said, maybe what we're going to do, they'll use AI tools to help generate these drafts, but we're going to put errors in there. We're going to tell them there are errors in there. And you're going to have to do that because just passing it up to the level above, you didn't learn it. And then, the last point I'm going to make, I'm super concerned when all of us with wisdom walk off the field. Like, who's going to have this same knowledge base that we were able to get and create that culture and that learning and all those things? These are challenges that I think we're not dealing with as a society. So that's my
the societal layer is fascinating. Thanks, Gary. That's really great. It leads me to my next question, which is, well, regardless of the size of the organization, you're always onboarding new people, right? And for venture funded, and this to you, Tony and Gary in particular, when there's venture funded companies, maybe more so during the ZERP environment, when there was lots of money flying around, you were able to sort of make mistakes in hiring and say, all right, well, I only need 10, I'll hire 20 and I'll let the others sort of fall away. I'm not sure that everybody has enough runway to do that and use that as their methodology of onboarding and aligning those teams, whether it's in business development or coding teams, et cetera, right? There was sort of a little bit of a luxury that startups had, maybe from 7 years ago to up to a year and a half, 2 years ago, where the next round was easy and the next round, was going to be a foregone conclusion. If you're onboarding folks and they need to be productive and aligned quickly, right? How do you solve that, right? Because you can't, say I only need I need 10 hires, I'll hire 20 and let the dead wood, move itself out of the way. Because you've got overhead issues with that, and then you've got, all sorts of reasons why that can't work anymore.
I think in a world of from ZERP to efficient growth, which is our byword now, as you move to this efficient growth, the one thing I might question, Kevin, I think in smaller orgs, the hires have always mattered. Each individual has mattered a lot because even in that environment, you didn't have a ton of redundancy. You may have spread out very far, but that didn't mean that you had redundancy.
Right.
And I think that the idea of getting people up to speed is great, but I also put a onus on the manager. I think the manager needs to take ownership and responsibility of getting people productive and also making decisions, by the way, in a hard one to do, like hire the wrong person.
Yeah.
Because the amount of wasted cycles on getting the wrong person sort of into the right place, we've all hired the wrong person. And there are a lot of reasons why that happens. Sometimes people are great interviewers. Sometimes we're interviewing for the wrong thing. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. But ultimately, I think the responsibility on getting people productive has to be on the manager, and the manager has to own what they're going to do to quickly do that and set up the right infrastructure to do it.
Tony, when you're looking at investments, and I would imagine your fund is probably, seed and up, right? It must be super critical, right? That you, if at all possible, make the right hire and that you get them productive, or the teams get them productive as quickly as possible. So that form of alignment, and any recommendations there as other people struggle with that.
No, look, I think we're doing a little bit of seed, but most of our companies focus on B2B SaaS, have about a $1.5–2 million worth of annual recurring revenue that are looking to scale. And in most cases, there's only 6 or 7 folks that are maybe on the payroll. They're doing a lot of outsourced talent. So I think you're right. The selection of talent is critical. And what I have seen in general, though, as you hire rank and file, is that there's just the hiring process, I think, has been tainted a little bit by AI. And quite honestly, again, I'm showing my age here. I'm like totally, outing myself. Just how easy it is to apply for jobs. I'm on the board of Yelp, and I was talking to the CHRO. There was one job we had 8,000 applicants. Like, it's amazing the number of people that are applying. And look, some people are not qualified. They're just taking a flyer here. But I think finding and identifying, world-class talent to separate, especially when you're in startup mode, or, like, those are critical hires. You just don't have the time to wait 90 days to find out somebody's not the right cultural fit or they don't have the right skill set. Man, 90 days to a startup it's like, that's critically important. So it's just putting again, a focus on this idea of, hiring. I think, you hire slow just to make sure you got the right culture fit, the skills. And I think there's going to be a need for new ways of looking at this in an AI world where I think people are answering interview questions using AI. They're using AI tools to apply for 100 jobs. Like, it's like we have a little bit of a technology hangover here, in my opinion, to getting to best-in-class talent for a startup.
And Tony, by the way, those numbers have expanded. I was just listening to this solution. I forget what it's called, but they basically use AI to go over LinkedIn, and they applied for something like 8,000 jobs.
Yeah.
They could, and with all personalized outreach, it is like, it's crazy.
Yeah, that brings me to a follow-up question. I was on a internal sort of brainstorming, which is part of the Hero Club. Julie is a member of the C-Suite Network, as am I. I'm also an investor in it. And one person had a concern, which is on the flip side, which was that for certain generations, his concern was stickiness as it relates to longevity in a position. When he looked at his sons, right, or his children, there was a complete disconnect between sort of his older children and his younger children as to sort of their expectation of tenure in an organization. And of course, in his particular industry, which was law, he was saying, like, how do, I don't want to be an incubator or generator of great talent, which is then poached, right? So that turned into a broader conversation about sort of stickiness. And, in the agency world, which is where I spend most of my time, there's an understanding that that people graduate out of your agency and you end up with these huge alumni networks, which can be really, really valuable. But at the same time, you want to find that balance, right? In creating stickiness as an organization, keeping your great talent without having to just throw money at them, right? And maybe culture, Julie, is the way to do that, right? I think it is, and that's why we have a really low churn rate at Did It, at least voluntary churn rate at Did It. And I think culture is one way, but how do you identify early in the hiring process that these people not only will be quick contributors and more than pull their weight, but also if you're going to invest in them, that you get the appropriate level of longevity from these hires. Any
Well, I
thoughts?
kind of just pile on your comment about culture, and it's not we've I know Tony, you're trying to out yourself. Look, I'm not. I'm only a couple of years behind you, so it's we're just wiser. You're just gonna have to change your vocabulary. That's all I'm gonna recommend for you. Okay, so I think I I think culture is often we talk about it. I think at some level we understand that that plays a role, but we always think it comes down to money. And look, money is important, but there is so much evidence. We've all seen it as managers through the years when, the number one thing of why people leave, they may say it's money, but when you actually have that exit interview and you talk to them, it's not. It's oh, and I was offered more money, but they weren't even interested in looking at those things for the extra $5 or whatever it is. I'm being dramatic, but it's about I wasn't happy. I wasn't getting recognized. My boss was giving me a hard time. I was unfair expectations. I was bored. Whatever the thing, it was about the culture and the experience far more than it was about the money. And, to your point, here the industry we're in is ridiculously incestuous. You guys know that from some industries you've worked with as well. There's some industries where it's so like you think about like security systems integration, the technology, it's pretty niche. It's a big, in terms of a TAM, it's a big number, but it's pretty niche in terms of the people in it. So yeah, there's a lot of moving around. It was the same in like auto repair, right? I mean, similar kinds of things. You kind of steal from each other all the time. We find here we're the biggest. People come after us a lot. Our people turn it down, even though there's a few more dollars, because they understand the value of the experience that they have every day. And because we tout culture to such an extent, so much more than anybody else, it's like the industry knows it. I think when you can make culture not just an internal differentiator, but an outward one, where you make that, in every RFP that you do, if you're a B2B service, every RFP that you do, you start with it, you talk about it. When we do M&A, we first go in and we talk about the culture because we need to have it be successful when we acquire, and people underestimate the importance of cultural when they do acquisitions and the integration process. I think, you talked about stickiness and hire, and so I don't want to take us fully off of that, but I do think we probably don't put enough emphasis on the cultural fit of the individual. We look fully at the experience and have you done. I will tell you, in most jobs, you can learn things if they're go-getters on the job. Culture is something that isn't taught. It's felt, it's the attitude. And so I think that we need to put more emphasis on that in the interview.
I want to play off of culture for a moment. I think that's a necessary ingredient. And I'll also throw the word in purpose, if I'll throw that around that, orgs, people like to be aligned to the purpose of the org. But I'm going to step those aside. I'm going to use 3 words in here that I hear when people choose to leave: lack of career pathing, lack of challenge, I'm not learning anymore, lack of training. So again, I'm putting some of the onus on us to also recognize that we want them to give back, but we also need to give them what they need. And I think without, some of that work along the way, we also leave open, quite a large thing that says, look, yeah, it's more money, but it's like a better career path for me. Or yeah, it's more money, but like I'm going to learn new skills and be more challenged. So I think it's a combination of things. I think you need to have good culture. You need to have a purpose that aligns with them, but you also need to give them sort of the tools that they feel that they're getting out of the role.
Great point, Gary. Tony, any thoughts?
I like Julie with the thumbs up there. No, look, I think some of these, I think, causation, correlation, like if your team never goes in the office hardly, and then they don't get kind of inoculated to the culture, and they never, there's a question for employee engagement. Do you have a friend at work? Like literally, like that's a good engagement question. Do you have a friend at work? You never end up with a friend at work, and then someone says, "Oh, I'll pay you $5 more an hour." You're like, well, like I'm not, I'm not ingrained here. I haven't rooted. So anyway, I think these are things that we're all gonna, wrestle with. But I, I think it'll be very interesting. I think in the next 12 to 24 months, with everything happening in the world, whether this idea of return to office with some companies mandating it, others not, what happens to promotions, what happens to attrition rates for employees, and whether we realize we're living a great big experiment that may have us kind of come back and rethink all of this. So
I love the friend at work thing, because it brings me back to what surprised us when we sort of ended up discussing the back to the office thing at Did It, which was it was driven mostly by the most junior staffers because they loved the friendships that they had at work, and you can't go out drinking on Zoom together on Thursday evening, right? So you can really only do that
well, you could have a Zoom happy hour, but it's just not the same.
It's not quite the same. It's a little weird. So that there's that, but it also reminded me that back when I was running WeCare, which was the predecessor to Giving Forward, as a for-profit company, we had zero churn, right? Because we raised 8 million for nonprofits through cause marketing, and the people that worked there, not only did we have zero churn, but when I had to shut it down, when Amazon was inspired to take it and run with it after their A/B split test, the folks got probably close to 40 to 50% raises when they went on to work at MongoDB or wherever they ended up going, because they were all underpaid and there was zero churn, right? But it was beyond purpose. It was purpose with mission layered on top of it. Gary, to your point, that I didn't fully understand it at the time that I was co-running it with the general manager. But those people that we hired, they had a higher purpose, right? They were just so driven to let's just figure out how to do social impact in a fun way that layers on marketing and technology in a unique way. And yes, we can have great culture at Did It, and yes, we can create the career paths and everything, but that purpose layer, along with a mission, was really powerful. So if you're in a boring category, right, and your mission is not so exciting, like, hey, it's the newest accounting software that improves your ability to decide whether to be compliant with FASB. Okay, maybe that's exciting to some people, but it's probably not that mission driven or purpose driven. So if you're in a business that doesn't have that sizzle, right, how do you layer on purpose? How do you get that emotional impact for your teams where they have their friends at work, but they also feel like maybe they're changing the world? Do you layer on corporate social responsibility? Are there sort of additional things you can do to get everybody sort of more emotionally engaged?
I'll go back to when I was at Party City before this, just because it was certainly there was a culture. It wasn't as culture forward as the one I'm at, so I'll switch it around a little bit. But the way that we try to add purpose that wasn't like a specific cause or was that we did some customer experience journey mapping and we're really looking at how the customers, flowed through, what the opportunities were. Coming out of that, of all the things that we needed to work on and where we were, had opportunities to improve that experience, was really an overarching insight, which was that, and this, you guys are gonna be like, wow, you guys are genius, that the reason people go to a party store is to create joy, right? They're looking to, like, wow, you guys are so smart to figure that out. Parties to make people happy, what? So, but the idea of being able to create joy, but to make it easy, that was the little tiny, addition, the little infinity to make easy, that we had to add in there. And it was that part. Yeah, they go and they're excited and it's a positive thing and it's a happy thing usually, but it's not easy. Like, they don't have the ability to understand all the things that they need to get to fill a room. Like, they don't have that creativity mindset. They don't have the experience with it. And so it's hard. And there's a lot of aisles and there's a lot of stuff. And, so that make joy easy became our mantra for every person employed at the company. So even if you were in accounting and you didn't have anything to do with the experience directly in the store, could you make joy easy? Could you make, can you make joy easy for your fellow colleague in that? Is it the processes? Is it the way that you interact with them? So when you could layer that over, are you making it easier for them to create joy for somebody else in their job? That became a purpose, if you will, of like why we were there, that kind of unified us. And so, I would say that it doesn't, if you're not in a place where the culture, or you're starting up and you're trying to create a culture, purpose is good, right? I mean, like, we have Ford Motor Company, it was, breast cancer awareness with Susan. Like, those are great. They don't permeate every meeting, right? They don't permeate every decision that you make. And so if you can find something that is, make joy easy is a purpose. It sounds lofty and it's great. It's not like curing cancer, but it gives you a sense of like, hey, I'm in a retail industry selling cheap stuff made from China. How good can I feel about it? Well, at the end of the day, somebody's got a birthday party that day. They're not going to forget. If you screw that up and make it hard for them, they're going to remember that for sure. You know what I mean? And so if we each take our responsibility seriously, that we're in the business of making joy easy for one another so that we can enable it all the way through the customer. That was my little story on creating purpose when you're selling, Chinese made crap, which I can say now, I don't work there, but
I had an example that I really think every company should consider. When I was at USAA, every important meeting, I should say, which is, let's just say 90%. Occasionally, a meeting happens that doesn't include this, but the meeting starts off with what's called a mission moment, and the purpose is to build enthusiasm for why we're all here, which is to serve, at the time, members of the military community and to ensure their financial security. And sometimes it would be a story of something heroic that a team member did, but often we try to take the content of that meeting and bring it into how it laddered back up to the mission. So if you're in a meeting like, oh, we need to take $3 million out of the marketing budget, that can be a tough meeting. Like, and everybody's like hoarding and doesn't want to give up their functions budget. But when you frame it in saying, in order to better serve our missions and to ensure their financial security, we need to have the most competitive product, which means that the cost of how we deliver that product needs to be competitive. And we know that a young sergeant only makes X dollars per year. And if we can reduce their car insurance by $10 a premium period, that's a win. And so when you bring things back and tie it to the mission, I think it forces people to understand, like, why am I here? Why do I care? And I think in so many companies, the mission statement, values, live on a website or on the front office wall, and people walk by them every day. And I'm not sure how many people could recite them. At USAA, I'd be willing to bet $1,000, 99.9% of the employees can recite the mission statement word for word and the corporate values and bring it home for you. And so when you have that type of belief, it is why they have very low attrition and why they've been able to be known in the industry for delivering great customer experience, because everything comes back to the mission. And when you talk about it in every meeting, it never becomes foreign or abstract or something that isn't relevant.
So I have so much I want to say on this topic. You may remember my side hustle is around sustainability, and I've been teaching about that for years. And we spend a lot of time on the topic of purpose and purpose-driven organizations and ESG and how it like connects to purpose and a lot of different things. There is research that backs up the power of purpose with performance, and organizations who have strong purpose, their financial performance is higher. I will add though that it can sometimes go awry, and my example is Unilever, which somewhat famously made the dictate that every one of their brands must have a purpose. Now, this got to a place where Hellmann's mayonnaise had the purpose of helping reduce food waste. Now, I am not here to say that that's a bad thing. Food waste it contributes to global warming. It's generally bad for our overall system of food production, but it was a stretch. And they got slammed for it. They got slammed for it from investors. They got slammed for it from some of the folks in the space that, you just took it too far. And so, as I think about the work we do, I do mission, vision, value sessions with multiple portfolio companies. And I will say, to your point, Kevin, it doesn't matter what industry. You can be an infrastructure company, you can be a cybersecurity company, you can be it doesn't really matter. You can have good mission, vision, values. But I think the necessary ingredient is authenticity. It has to authentically connect to your business. It can't be forced. It can't be like, I made something up. I loved your example, Julie. It felt so authentic to me. Like, of course. And obviously, Tony, in the example you brought, USAA has this beautiful connection there. It's so authentic. I think that's the key ingredient that is the difference between organizations creating something that sticks and something that's window dressing.
Yeah, those are all great examples. I'm probably going to go back and revisit its mission and purpose statements, because a recent client who's worked with us 4 times at 4 different companies over the years recently hired us again. And when I sort of asked her why, she said, because you make me the hero every time, right, within the organization. And that really struck me, because I never really articulated that to my team. They sort of, I think, inherently got that if you make your point of contact, or whoever signed the agreement, right, if you make them the hero, then they will love you for it, right? And that's such a broad mandate, right? Including getting them to say no to things that they think they should do that might have made you more money as an agency. And I look back at situations where we had, a crazy client that said, I want to do this because they got directly pitched by some media company with some shiny object. And we said, probably not the best use of your money. And we would have made the commission on it, right? But we said no. And I think, it sort of was an epiphany for me to think through, like, well, that part of that is keeping them the hero, right? Because if they end up, overriding us and forcing that decision, which has happened in the past, right? We didn't advocate strongly enough, right? That we didn't keep them the hero, right? Because then they got the stuff flowed, hit the fan, right, at some point. So to finish up, like, what else should we have discussed with regards to aligning teams and overcoming challenges that we didn't touch on? Any thoughts?
Hey, I was just going to say one, and again, this is maybe a large a company example is just, I think, structural barriers for teams working together. And, I think the marketing function has been a little guilty of this, which is, if my KPIs are brand awareness, consideration, intent, I go and talk to the CFO. Like, there's often these we're on different frequencies or talking different languages, and so I do think when you try to bring teams together, trying to find some common language in terms of what's important. Again, if you use the example of USAA trying to launch a new CMS, the IT KPIs and the marketing KPIs are very, very different. And when you're working on a joint project like that, I think it's incumbent on finding some things that both of you can be measured on in terms of making the effort successful. So I think structural, cultural communication to me are the big things that can often trip up folks when you're talking past each other, even though you all may have the best of intentions.
I agree. I think the only thing I would add to that, on the structural piece, I found that like pods work, where it's not a organizational matrix structure, but it's a working structure where you've got a pod, and the pod incorporates people from multiple functions, but they work together on a regular basis. They have daily stand-ups. And that works if, kind of my one layer on is, if you've got the teams, all the teams focused on three things. What are we like the rule of three. Three things. What are our three goals? And we share them. And we share the high level KPI. It's market share, it's EBITDA, or it's revenue, or it's a launch, whatever the thing, but it's very specific. In your function, you may have specific KPIs that help to roll up to it, but you ought to all be able to say, look, those are the things, are what we're doing getting us there. And then in that working pod, you've got a cross-functional set so that you don't get so far deep in your lane that you lose track of what the greater organization is there to do. The organization has to work symbiotically to be successful. It can't work, in little pockets. So that would be my one ad.
So Gary, silos. It seems like that's the
I'm gonna go in a slightly different direction and say the CEO and founder can't allow bad behavior. I think that I would like to assume that everyone on the executive team are mature, have the right intent, are hoping to move the organization forward with a consistent goal in mind. That having been said, I've also seen that not to be the case in how people come to the party. And there's a role for the leader to enforce what the norm is, to enforce how we are going to operate as an organization and what is acceptable and not acceptable in driving alignment and in execution. And it verges on culture, it verges on a lot of the things that we've been discussing about today. But I'm just not going to give the CEO and leader a free pass here. I think they have ultimate responsibility for all of this.
Quick follow up on that, Gary. Like when there's a multi-layered structure, right, and it's a big organization, and between the top of the C-suite pyramid and down to the rank and file, there might be 5, 6, 7 layers. How do you assure that sort of good behavior mandate is sort of carried through? And I'm sure Julie will say our culture.
Well, I mean, culture obviously as well plays a role here. I just believe if you're a leader of an organization, as you're well aware, it's like incoming all the time. Like, like a squirrel, you're like moving, turning your head all the time to, this is the thing I got to focus on. And I think if the leader sets up as a priority of how we are going to achieve our goals is ensuring alignment up and down the organization, you enforce that at each level culturally about what the norm is. And everyone knows all the way up to the CEO that we're going to hold people accountable for a way of working, a way of making choices and asking questions and asking about the intent of actions so that we can drive alignment. Anytime that I've had disagreement, it has always been the most beneficial to like have an honest and open discussion, figure out where we're coming from. We're all trying to get to the same place, hopefully. It's just how we do it. And let's talk about that. And maybe I didn't understand it or didn't get it or didn't know about it. And you need to be open to accepting that.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me. This has been a great roundtable discussion. There'll be so many valuable tidbits that will slice it up into a lot of pieces for social media purposes. And I think we'll probably have like a half year's worth of social media posts out of this. So thanks so much for sharing your wisdom. And hopefully the folks ingesting this content over the next coming weeks and months will be able to implement this. This is great.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.